It's a pleasure to have you both here today. For those joining, listening live, listening on the recording, we are here to talk about science and sustainability in the hair and beauty industry. This is coming about as consumers are becoming more conscious of what ingredients are in the products that they use and the history of what the hair and beauty industry has done as far as including ingredients that are particularly dangerous to us, especially when we think about marginalized audiences, products for Black women, women of color, where we're bearing the brunt of these dangerous ingredients that are exposed to our skin and causing problems known and unknown. I'll be facilitating this conversation. My name is Janice Newson. I am founder and CEO of Lillian Augusta Beauty, where we are creating healthy and eco-friendly options for braids with our plant-based braiding hair. And I am joined by two lovely, intelligent ladies here, Dr. Elissia Franklin, as well as Eliane Treadwell. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the both of them. I'm going to let you know you're going to be taken aback by these bios because these women are absolutely incredible. Our first panelist, Dr. Elissia Franklin. Elissia is a researcher at the Silent Spring Institute. The Institute is committed to uncovering the causes of women's health issues that comes from our environment, particularly when it comes to breast cancer. Dr. Franklin is an alumni of the University of Illinois Champaign, as well as Purdue University. She's done research at Northwestern. She's done research in China at Tsinghua University. She started her own podcast as well, the Research Her podcast, because she's just so committed to uncovering these women's health issues, particularly for Black women. And she is a nationally recognized Black chemist. So welcome to you, Dr. Franklin. Thank you so much for joining us.
That sounded so good. Thank you so much for having me.
It sounded good because it's true. It is true. And I'd also like to welcome our second panelist, Eliane Treadwell. Eliane has some serious experience as well. She is the founder of her own company, Relevant Labs, where they support beauty brands in figuring out that secret sauce and launching their products. She is an alumni of DePaul University as well as the University of Cincinnati, and she is a member of the Society of Cosmetic Chemists. She's been recognized all over. She's been to the White House. They've got her picture on the Christmas tree at O'Hare Airport. So welcome to you too, Eliane.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And I know y'all see the Chicago connection here. Eliane's here in Chicago Heights. Elissia's from Chicago. I'm from
Yes.
Chicago. I can't keep telling y'all we're the best city in the world. It doesn't matter if it's cosmetic chemistry, food, landscape, we have it, and it is here. So I'm really glad you all are joining us for this conversation. I've been really excited about this conversation because this is something that is really coming to the forefront more and more when we're talking about hair and beauty products, especially to have this conversation with you two. You're both amazing. And I want to start out with learning a little bit more about how you all got into your fields. Eliane, I know you got into this pretty early. You took cosmetology in high school, which I've got to say, shout out to the school for offering that. That is a really cool class that I don't think I've ever seen offered in high school. But I'd love to hear more about how you evolved to where you're at today.
Yeah, so I actually was encouraged to go into STEM from my high school chemistry teacher. So he seen that I had a natural ability to understand science and math pretty easily. So he was like, I think, science will be a good fit for you. And at that time, I went to school in the ghetto. I grew up in the hood. So going to college was not a common thing. So him encouraging me to go to college was like a really big deal for me. So I took heed to his word, studied chemistry in college. I actually got a double major in biology and chemistry for undergrad. And then I went on to do other work. So before I got into cosmetic chemistry, I actually studied food science and I worked in food science for a little bit. And then I went to environmental chemistry and I was an environmental chemist for a while. But throughout those different career paths, I still stayed in cosmetics because I loved it. And I couldn't find at the time anything that worked well for my skin that even matched well for my skin. So I kind of stayed in the game. And then finally I decided to branch out and start Relevant Laboratories, which helps beauty brands, big and small, build their business.
Yeah, and If you would like to talk a little bit more about when you got started, I know that you had been working somewhere and you
Mhm.
didn't have a supervisor. They were requiring you to do more work than what you were expected to do. They were even putting you down for your own research in front of all the employees, and that really drove you to start your company. Can you tell us a little bit more about that story?
Oh man. So I was working in environmental chemistry for a while, and my supervisor had quit, and we were without a supervisor for a while. And the lab director and the ops manager came to me and was like, "Hey, would you consider applying for the manager position?" And I was like, at first I was like, "Oh no, I don't want it." And I was like, I guess I could, because I mean I know the group pretty well. And so I did, and I get in the interview, and it was just like a belittling fest. Like, well, how would you handle this and how would you handle that? So finally, they ended up hiring somebody else, a white man, in that position who had no experience, and the group went down. So I was the most experienced chemist in the group, and we went into a meeting about some chromatography work that I was doing, and nobody in the room knew how to interpret the chromatography. That I was the only one that knew how to do it. So basically, paint the picture clearly, I was the only Black person in the room, and I was in the room with maybe about six other white people, and they passed my data around. It was like, "This is trash. I would throw this away." Like literally, these were their words. Like, "This is absolute trash. I would throw this away. I would never report this." But nobody understood how to interpret the data. And then we sat in this meeting for 2 hours of them passing around my data, because one of the ops managers was trying to say that I was falsifying data, but she didn't understand it to even say I was falsifying it or not. But in the end, after sitting around listening to them beat me up for 2 hours, they was like, "You know what? We're just gonna do it the way she's been doing it." And I like nobody could find, like, the QA manager was like, "No, she's doing it right. She's not doing anything illegal. Like, she's within her confines." And I remember when after that meeting was over, I went in the washroom, I cried, and I looked myself in the mirror and I said, "This is my last year here. I don't care if I have to sell candy on 95th and Stony Island. I'm getting up out of here. Like, I'm quitting. I will not be here another year." And so things just orchestrated where I was able to like land and take off with my business, and my business like I had a viral moment, and my business just took off from there, and I quit. I was like, "I'm out of here." Like I knew December 31st was going to be my last day. I actually ended up quitting before then, but I knew that that was my last year, because I had been through so much with this company, being overlooked for promotions, being overlooked because I'm Black. At the time, I was like, I think I weighed maybe 60 pounds bigger than what I am now, maybe 80 pounds bigger than what I am now. So I was always seen as the big Black girl. I'm almost 6 feet tall. So I was always like, pushed in a corner, pushed away, but always used to do the hard work and stay late and all of that. And I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. If I'm going to work this hard, I might as well work this hard to build my own. So that's what I did.
What a story. I mean, you really took some resilience there to make that move and start something for your own and get out of a horrible situation. So glad that Relevant Laboratories is here today. Hate that it came from that situation, but
Yeah.
so proud of you where you're at today and what you're doing for so many brands all over the country.
Yeah. So
Elissia,
many
we'd love
Black
to hear
women
more.
experience that. And I feel
Yeah,
bad. My heart hurts so bad for all these Black girls that's experiencing that, but it's our story.
Alicia, we'd love to hear more about how you got started as well. Now, you've been published in some of the top journals, you've been tried and true to chemistry. How'd you find your way to where you're at today?
Yeah, similar to this idea that like you're in high school and you are one of the few who really gets science. And so for me, it was more so my mom nurtured that. And she was like, "Yeah, my baby not that great." And in social studies and reading and writing, but really good at science. So my mom was a school counselor, so she was well connected in that way. And so there were some people who would reach out to her with different summer programs, things like that. So my mom was a first generation college student, so I really already kind of had an advantage that a lot of my peers, again, coming from Chicago, south side of Chicago, a lot of like a lot of your peers don't go to college, or you don't have any, there may not be that easier connection. But I did go to, I had that with my mom. She sent me to a college preparatory academy. So shout out to Brooks. So I went to Brooks, and
How did I know you went to Brooks?
yeah. Yeah, and so I went to Brooks, and my teachers too really supported me in that. And so I had the combination of like my mom, who had connections, and folks would share options for her students, and she would be like, "Oh, I'm gonna send that to my baby." Combine that with my teachers, like, who would also like share summer programs. So when I was in high school, I had tried out like engineering as an option. Like, so I did an engineering summer program. I did a pharmacy summer program, and neither of those really resonated with me too much. I now know, like, my older brain is like, oh, engineering is so complex. At the time I was doing electrical engineering as a high school student. So I didn't like electrical engineering, but now I was like, maybe I would have liked chemical engineering. Anyways, the point is that I did try these different things. Definitely tried the pharmacy. I was a pharmacy tech in high school, and I did not like this idea that pharmacists stand on their feet. They get all this education, and then they stand on their feet all day, and they do the same thing over and over and over and over. And I knew that repetition for me was not going to work, because at the time when I was transitioning from high school to college, it was one of those, I'm going to be a pharmacist. And I just knew that. But then when I saw what they actually did in practice, I was like, that repetitive nature of the work would just get old for me. And so when I went to college, I went to University of Illinois, and I started I also like volunteered at a hospital. I was like, I don't want to be around sick people all day. So I know I don't want to be in medicine. So scratch that off the list of things you can do in science. I had no idea about this area of research. Like, research was new for me. I know I had heard of Einstein, but the idea of research being a career, that is not something that you see in real time when you are, again, like a person on the south side of Chicago living life. You don't see research. So when I saw it for the first time, just because I was trying to build up my resume, I was like, oh, y'all do this like full time. Like, y'all just come to the lab, you apply for some grants or whatever, and then this gets to be your career. So I was doing biochemistry research. And the bio part I could not get with, because at the time, well, period, whenever you're dealing with like biological things, they have their own minds, they have their own time frame, and it's a really slow, it can be very slow, it can be very fast, but the point is, it's very unpredictable. I did not like that element, but I knew that I liked this idea of being in the lab and creating science. And that's why I like to tell people the difference between like a medical doctor or a pharmacist versus a scientist is scientists are the ones who are creating the science so that they can then relay the messages to the different types of doctors. And I really like this idea of finding things and being the one to discover or be the first to see this thing. And that was like, so doing the biochemistry research, I did some plant science studies and things like that. I landed on, okay, I'm gonna go to Purdue and I'm just gonna test out some stuff. So I just went to different labs, knew I was gonna go into did analytical chemistry, and landed on a mass spectrometry like route, I guess, so to say. And it was all, smooth sailing from there, as smooth as you would expect, let's say that. And so once I was finishing my dissertation, as if I wasn't already doing enough, I said, you know what I'm gonna do while I'm finishing my dissertation? I'm gonna start a podcast. And my podcast is gonna be a podcast that talks to Black women about health-related issues, and also bring to the forefront some of the women who are in these industries doing different work in science and research, because I didn't see that. I didn't see that research was actually a career. So I want to show all the wonderful Black women who are in research so that other folks can know what we're out here doing. Working on my podcast, and I ran into the topic of chemicals of health concern and endocrine disrupting chemicals and asthma associated chemicals in the products that Black women use. And it was the first publication or the first study of chemicals of health concern that are in the products that Black women use specifically, and it was 2018. And for that to have, that was just so mind-blowing to me that it was 2018. People have been doing product testing for as long as there have been industries, and no one had said, hey, you know, Black women are disproportionately affected by some of these ailments, and maybe it may be the products that they're using. We should test the products that they use. And for it to have been 2018, I was like, are you kidding me that this is the first study to do this? I want to go over there and I want to be a part of that space of like environmental health. And so I really did send a cold resume. Like I sent my cold resume with this cover letter to Silent Spring because they were the ones who had published the manuscript or published the paper, and they got back to me, and like the rest is kind of history because I still work for Silent Spring today, but it was really just a cold email. So I switched from being a lipidome at the time when I was working on, I was in a postdoc when I sent my resume over to Silent Spring, but I was strictly like analytical chemistry, looking at lipid structures, very much in the weeds of trying to understand molecular chemistry. And then I switch over to like this more, I want to study the chemicals that Black women are at risk of being exposed to in the environment, and potentially understanding some of the adverse outcomes that are associated with a lot of those chemicals. So that's where I'm at now.
What a story of discovering that career field and where you could actually place yourself and place your skills. And you mentioned your mom and you mentioned your podcast, and you've actually brought your mom onto your podcast to talk about her story where she was struggling to write, period, and went to writing a full doctoral dissertation. Can you talk a little bit more about she's been an inspiration to you in your career?
Yeah, of course. Like my mom is the first person in our family to have gone to college, and not only gone, she successfully got her bachelor's, then she went and got a master's, then she went and got her doctorate of education and administration. So I have this person in my life who definitely has a great influence on me because I do look up to my mom a lot. I have, I have two, everyone has the two sides. So, they always say, then you got your daddy side. So you have that nice combination of all the things. And so, but going to the point of my mom, yes, she too is from the South Side of Chicago. And one thing she often talks about is how maybe the education system does not always prepare our students for what college looks like, and also does not set them up for success in college. And so she was the product of that. So having to she went to Aurora University, and having to go to college without having the tools, because she went to Carver and then switched
Oh, I
over.
went to Carver.
Really?
I graduated from there, high school.
Yeah. And then Lindblom. And so going to these, she graduated from Lindblom, but she went her last year of high school, and that's it. Even having gone to Lindblom, which is maybe one of the better schools on the South Side of Chicago, she still went and was not ready for the extent in which she was expected to know how to write an essay. It's like, no, that's not how they taught us how to write the essays and things like that. And so but very well knew that she wanted to, excel in that way and stick beside it. So yeah, my mom has been a support system, and because she chose to go in administration, and she was a school counselor specifically when I needed her most, it was helpful to, have kind of that sounding board. And also, I'll say a lot of the support that I got was not even directly my mom. It was her network that really helped me into getting to college. So one thing is, like, my mom definitely did the FAFSA for me, which is a huge advantage because a lot of people had to do the FAFSA themselves. Their parents weren't involved and things like that. But my mom did all of that for me. And then beyond that, when it was time to do the application, she had a line sister, or my aunt, who pretty much walked me through writing my college essays, helped me with writing pretty much the whole application of getting into every college. Like she sat down with me and did everything. My resume, these are things that, like, it wasn't necessarily like my mom directly, but who she put into her life so then they can play a role in my life as well. So yes, I'm blessed.
Yeah, that's beautiful that your mom and also that village around her was able to support you in that way. Really wonderful to see that in action. Now, we're here talking about science, we're here talking about sustainability, how it's finding its way into hair and beauty, if it's finding its way into hair and beauty in some cases. And I'd like to know from you all, how far do you think we've gone and how far do we think we have to go? We're seeing innovation, right? It's happening on packaging, it's happening on the formulas themselves, it's happening on disposal. But I'd love to know from you both, where do you say that we are in this movement towards better made products and safer products?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. I think that we've made a lot of progress. I can say we have made a lot of progress, but we have so much more to go. And I know that Dr. Franklin can attest to this, that, especially with doing research with Black women and finding out what works well for us and just works well for the body in general. It's a long path. I mean, we have a lot of barriers in our way, from funding to getting participants, just figuring it all out because it's so many new nuances now that we have to consider. So it's like you want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but you got to also keep something, behind in a sense. So we have made tremendous progress. I mean, I think the packaging movement with sustainability, like the reusable packaging, things like that has been great. But as far as like ingredients and, dispelling myths out there, like I feel like what I see in the industry is like us as cosmetic chemists, we are having to constantly fight like, guys, this isn't science. This is nothing. None of that is science backed. That's all junk. That's not true. Or we're trying to like promote like this is okay. It's safe. It's been tested. You can trust us. So it's kind of like we're in limbo here. Like some people trust us, some people don't. And then we still have so much more to go, especially in the African American community.
I'll add to that. So for me, one of the most interesting thing that I didn't know, and I think a lot of people are unaware of, is that chemicals do not have to be tested for safety before they are put into products. And that's where we are. That is where we are. That
Mhm.
we live in a world where you can be purchasing a product that says that it's safe or that it's healthy or that it's good for you. Just think about all of the nutrition bars you might buy. So that's an easy thing that people can think about is, okay, when you buy cereal and it says blase blah on it, like, oh, healthy for you, it still can have chemicals in it that are not healthy for you, right? But because it's low calorie, we consider like, oh, the calorie count, but not actually the composition and the chemical composition of it. And so when I think about products, I most so am concerned with this idea that we have thousands of chemicals that can be incorporated into products, and a large majority of them have not been tested to see how safe they are, but they are still being brought into people's homes, used daily, used by the eyes, used by the mouth. Like if you think about exposure routes, so this idea, these chemicals can get into your body in so many different ways. So they can be absorbed through the skin, you can breathe them in, you can orally take them in, and then also through the eyes, through just all these different avenues, right? And in some cases, like when you have a powder or a spray, you're having multiple ways of exposure, right? Because with a spray, you're smelling it in, it's also touching the skin, getting the eyes everywhere. And because of those compounded exposures, that can lead to differences in our that can lead to health disparities in itself, because I've heard this saying like maybe hygiene is cultural, or the way in which we maintain maintenance is cultural. So you have Black women who may use more of hair products or more of these intimate care products or different types of menstrual care products, leading to disparities in health. Another thing that I think is interesting is the chemicals are seen as innocent until proven guilty. So a lot of times the chemicals, it takes so much effort on the researcher and the scientist to say, this chemical is hazardous, or this chemical may be of concern. And we have to like, I mean, have evidence down to the health outcome that is associated with, rather than it just being like, let's not use this stuff until we understand it. So that's concerning. That's what I most find concerning. And yeah, I'll stop there, and then maybe we can.
I do have a small tidbit of pushback on that, just a little bit. I think that with first of all, the FDA does do a bit of regulation. They don't regulate every single chemical, but we are limited to what we can put in products and how much of it we can put in a product. So, for instance, a popular preservative is phenoxyethanol. We are limited only to 0.9% in a total formulation. So, you know, there are measurements. The EU does a phenomenal job, and a lot of us formulate. I know a lot of Black chemists formulate to the EU standards, where we have things in place that tell us you can only use so much of this, you can only use so much of that in a combined um, formula or something like that. So we do have some regulations in place. And then also too, with like, you know, the penetration route, the ability for a product to actually like enter into the bloodstream, into the body, and that can actually do some harm. It takes so much for that. So most products, topical products, are not getting down to the dermis level of the skin, because so much more complicated than what it sounds like. But it takes a lot to get down to the dermis, and I think that like we have like, you know, to Dr. Franklin's point, we do have to like make it easier where we can test these products to make sure that they're safe, to make sure that ingredients are safe. But I think also too um with cosmetic companies, I do think that there should be some form of regulation in place where they actually are testing their products to prove its safety, to prove that it's not going to cause any harm, or the ingredients used in it is not going to cause any harm. Because even with the clean beauty movement that's out there, that's a bunch of junk. Like honestly, like it's fluff. But you know, I think that we have to be really mindful of like as product developers and companies that build products, we have to be mindful of the people that we're impacting. And I think that you know, doing the legwork and doing the research and finding out where these ingredients source from, how are they manufactured, you know, where are they manufactured at, is it in a safe environment, is it in a clean environment, you know, so forth and so on. I think that doing the legwork of that is going to be the biggest change, I feel like, in the industry, where we'll see more cleaner products and more safer products.
I think that's a great or did you have something you wanted
I wanted
to add?
to add, and one of the challenges that come with that is like this idea like of toxicology, right? Where we've heard the saying, maybe folks have heard the saying like the dose makes the poison, like the dose makes the poison. And one of the most complicated parts about this field of like the exposure and chemicals is it's not linear. It's not like, oh, the lowest amount that you can put in a product necessarily means the safest route, because there's enough studies that shows that the points of adverse health outcome may not be the lowest dose. It could be a higher dose, and it's not linear, and it's not the same for every chemical. So this can get very complicated when we start talking about like, oh, there are some boundaries or some limitations on like how much of a chemical can be put into a product, because again, because the dose makes the poison, but the poison is so many different poisons. Now you have to measure the dose of that poison for every single chemical out there, and there isn't just like a blanket dose you can put across a bunch of chemicals. So it becomes, that is one of the challenges in this field of research, is like trying to figure out what that dose is, and if there is a way to truly regulate in a way that is like, okay, can we tell somebody to put 0.001% of, you know, make that a percentage for making up that, and will that be effective anyway? So why even put it in the product in the first place if you have to put it at such a low dosage or such a low concentration too? So yeah, to your point, it's just like, it is like there are some regulations, but the research, sometimes what I question is like the research that supports the regulated amounts. And at what point do you, because they'll have this regulated amount of like a chemical, and then you look up 5 years from now, and now it gets lower because they realize even that was too high. So they lower it some more, and they keep lowering. It's like, well, at what point do we just say like, well, maybe we just shouldn't use that chemical because at this point the concentration is so intolerable, like the concentration needed for it to be tolerable is so low that we should just probably find a safer alternative to that chemical altogether.
Yeah, and I've seen that in the recent days. I can honestly say, like, I've seen replacement chemicals come into play where we, even within the preservatives, I could just, hang out in the preservative area for a while. Like when it comes down to preserving products, that's been one of the biggest changes. I feel like the biggest shift in our industry has been preservatives, where we were heavy on parabens, and then everybody was like, no, 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 no parabens. So then we went to phenoxyethanol, and everybody's like, no, 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 no. So now we're going, in different directions to find safer ways. But I think that I think when we look at health, we have to look at it holistically and not just focus on like that one, like, okay, say, all right, it's just all your hair products. It's just all your skincare products. Like, I think like we have to think about what we're ingesting as well, because that plays a bigger part. Because I was explaining to someone recently, I'm like, if they did I read a Mintel report, I think it was, that talked about the average of how much a woman washes their hair. So they like polled all these different women from different races, and Black women on average wash their hair every 2 to 4 weeks, which is just a general thing, right? So if I'm using a shampoo every other week, let's say, the chances of that having a negative impact on my hair or on my body is a very slim chance, like, of that being an issue. So let's say phenoxyethanol is in all of my hair products, and I only use it every other week. The chance it's a rinse off product. It's not going to be on my scalp for long. It's not going to penetrate anything too quickly. So we have, like when you think about that, another thing that they do regulate is like what type of product you're using this for. So is this a leave on, a rinse off? Is this a treatment product? And then they decipher the percentages from there to say like, okay, if this is a rinse off product, you might have a little bit more wiggle room to use more of it. But if it's a stay on product, you might have to bring it down a little bit because it could cause irritation or it has shown signs of whatever. So in some cases, some people decide to just do without it, but you have some people that's like, I want a functional product that works. So I don't want to do without this, So I think that one thing that we have to do in the industry is use language I feel like the language is so important to like tell the story, like not to scare consumers to say, all of these products are bad, like silicones are awful, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, but like really be able to give them the right information and science back information that says this is safe for you to use, but we use it at a lower concentration because we don't want to cause X, Y, and Z, but not scare people.
So
That's
we've
a
come a
difficult
long way,
thing because
right?
people are scary. Understandably though.
We've certainly come a long way from rubbing lead on our faces, right? Back in the days of yesterday. But there's some places where we still have room for improvement for sure. Now, Eliane, you're seeing brands before any of us see them, right? Before the customer, before your Silent Spring Institute, you're seeing them when they're still saying, we just want to create something. How are you guiding them in that direction of, hey, let's consider safety in the best way possible? Let's consider how to make this a more sustainable product versus what may already be out there. Can you talk to us a little bit how you work with brands to make sure you get them on the right track?
Well, what I do silently is I don't even talk to my brands about it. I just do it. Like just being a Black woman in the industry, you have to take the lead. And I feel like God placed me in this position to be able to do that. So I want safer products out there for Black women. So I'm going to make safer products for us to use. So I'm going to do the research. I'm going to look to Silent Springs and see what they say. You know what I'm saying? Like I am going to be ahead of the curve so that when I present this ingredient or this formulation idea to my client, I've already did the research and vetted out these different raw material suppliers. And I'm kneecap to kneecap to figure out what is safe? How are you all testing this? When you're doing your clinical data, are you involving Black women? Like, I don't use any form, I try to like stay clear of any active ingredients that don't involve Black women, because we are the last of everything, you know? So now you're starting to see, and I've seen this now recently, is that I met with a raw material supplier earlier this week, and I remember when they first gave me their clinical data, it had no Black women in it. It was only Caucasian and Asian women. When I met with him on Monday or Tuesday, I think it was, he was like, we got new clinicals, and like it involved Black and brown women in there as well. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to see when you're presenting ingredients, because you want to make sure that we're involved and we are safe. And then you want to also reach across the board and ask friends like, hey, you know, what kind of research have you seen done on this particular ingredient? Have you seen anything come up where it's like it could be a hiccup down the line? What about it? What is its impact on the environment? Is it gonna, are we burning more fossil fuels, or, what is this gonna look like 10, 15 years down the line? Am I gonna have to bring this back and do a reformulation 5 years from now? So these are all of the things that I try to look out for, and just like make sure that I'm doing my part as a chemist to get ahead of the curve, because we don't have anybody. Like before, our Black owned brands didn't have Black people to come to. And then when somebody comes to me and asks me to formulate a product for them, they basically saying, we trust you to make this safe. We trust you to make this for us. And if I'm not doing that, if I'm not doing my work where I'm researching and putting in the time and effort, then what are you hiring me for?
Love that. Now, Dr. Franklin, you're on the other end here where you're really at the center of what's happening when it comes down to we already know something's wrong or we suspect something's wrong. We need to get some information to back it up. So we'd love to hear about how you, through either the Institute, your podcast, or other avenues, that you're communicating your findings with the general public.
Yeah, so it is a long process, let's just say that, because a lot of the times when you're in research, you don't just have money to exist in your field. Like you have to get the money first. And until you have first shown like other people why this work is important, you'll sit around on this idea for years, if you're lucky, months, but years before you have the credibility or you have the evidence that people should actually care about this work, right? And so I think about my work around right now. One of my projects is around hair extensions and understanding what are some of our exposures from hair extensions. Now, you start off with like this random idea of like, I want to study this thing. And first you have to convince people that it's worth studying. Once you finally are able to convince them and get funding, now you have to pursue the project, get it peer reviewed through your peer reviewers, your panel of scientists or whatever, who then say, okay, this is scientifically sound. Now that we understand that it's scientifically sound, let's start communicating this to the masses. But you can only communicate to the masses after the field has accepted this as something that that is credible, right? And so one of the challenges that I've had as someone who is very much I like to be transparent. I need people to know today is that scientific process of, okay, we start here, we get here. And I guess like where I'm at with it is I do try to stay on top of the literature and like understanding what can I share at this moment, what has been deemed as credible, what has gone through the peer review process, sharing that. And what's most important to me is that I'm sharing it with the people that it matters. A lot of times what's happening in that funnel from science to the community is folks will create these random, just where do they go, what are they called? Infographics. And they sit there on someone's Instagram page or on someone's website, and it never gets to the community in which is impacted by whatever that thing is. And even before that, there are a lot of people who come up with papers and they don't even try to translate to the community in which they're working with. And my goal has been, like, one of the initial goals of my podcast, or one of the purposes of my podcast is this idea that a lot of this work is behind a paywall, and you should not have to pay one for the science that your tax dollars is going towards paying for, quite frankly. But beyond that, you shouldn't have to go through this. I say all the time, you shouldn't need a degree in chemistry to read a ingredients label. I have 2 degrees in chemistry and I still struggle with reading the ingredients label. And it's similar to that when I think about the research, when you shouldn't need a degree to be able to translate some of this work, but it just is the nature of how science works. And so my goal is to take the knowledge that I have as a scientist and then break it down for the masses, because it's just an unfair process. And typically who gets left behind are Black folks in this process.
Well, we certainly appreciate people like yourself who are really taking that extra step to communicate with folks who aren't chemists, and they just want to know, hey, can I use this? Is it going to cause me a problem? And especially through your podcast, so people can reach to that and understand what they're using on a day-to-day basis. Now, Eliane, you've been quite vocal about some of the brands that you support: Stratia Skin, Tatcha, Kayali. What's a brand out there that you've seen that you really think is pushing us forward with how they do sustainability in beauty?
Oh, it's a lot of brands out here that's doing it. Fenty is one of my faves. I love how they're doing what they're doing with their packaging. Um, Man, off the top of my head, that's hard. But it's a lot of indie brands that's out here. I feel like that are doing it. One of them is Perfect Stride. I love their products. I'm a little biased because I formulated that one, but it's really good. It's a really good product. Um, Oh man, a lot of Asian companies that's not even in America, honestly, that is doing it. That's such a hard question to come off the top of my head. I would have to think about that one. But I don't. I generally, what you see me speak about on like social media are the brands that I actually like. I actually use. I've never talked about anything that I don't use. So yeah, it's so many. I'm sorry.
Hey, that's okay, because if there's so many, that means we're doing something right. Because if we would have
I
asked you
love your
maybe,
hair though. I did see somebody use it and I touched it for the first time and I was like, wow, this is bomb. I had a friend that
we
had it.
we are one of those brands that's making moves. Certainly want to make sure that people can have that quality, but also have something that they can wear confidently and safely as well. A
I'm
question
proud of your work
for
too. Kudos to you.
Thank you so much. A question for the both of you. We're seeing this movement happen. Some of it seems like it's not really based in anything. They're just out there saying stuff. On the other side, people are truly trying to make sure these products work and that they're better for our safety and that they're better for our environment. I'd love to hear from both of you outside of the products themselves. What other solutions do you see as needed in this new wave of product consciousness, green products, or making things that are clean for the body? Education is certainly one we've talked about already. There's marketplaces out there like the Grove Collaborative, Credo Beauty, where they sort of pre-sort out the brands for you so you don't have to go find them yourselves. Interested in your thoughts on what else you think we need outside of better products themselves.
I first go to policy. I first go to, we need policies that are in place that then trickle down to the consumer. So if you have a policy that says, hey, we want to eliminate formaldehyde releasers from every single product because we know formaldehyde is a known carcinogen. And if you're releasing it into a product, there's the potential there to be exposed to formaldehyde, right? And so I say policy because policy could affect the marketplace overall, because you'll have you can't produce a product with formaldehyde releaser. So then the manufacturers can't produce a product with it. And then the individual stores will not have it in the store, and then the individual cannot purchase it. Now, beyond like policies that can then trickle down, we can then go to that next layer of manufacturing. We can start, like, it would be nice if manufacturers would start having standards of, hey, we are not going to include these chemicals. But if they choose not to have those policies in place on their own time, then we could have stores. So some stores are doing a better job than others at regulating or accepting what products will come into their stores. Like, you have, you have your comments. We have different stores like a Sephora or a Target that do a little bit more regulating of like what they will accept as a new product on their shelves. You also may have Ulta is another one that they do a pretty good job at like not allowing. I'm not saying they're complete, like their red list and my red list may not align. And what I mean by red list is the list of chemicals that they would allow in their store and the list of chemicals that I may say they shouldn't allow these. So that it may be a little bit more lenient than what I would assume. But overall, it's this idea of actually putting up a bit of a filter so that people can go into your store and have a little bit of, knowing that the products won't be terrible for them. So I'd say that. And my other thing I'd say is more regulation of fragrance. To me, fragrance is another wild, wild west where it can be a combination of hundreds of mixtures of chemicals, and companies are not necessarily required right now to disclose every single chemical that are in the fragrances. And so some of those may be endocrine disruptors, some of them may be associated with asthma, some of them may be associated with cancers and things like that. So if we can get more simplification of fragrances and disclosure of fragrances as well, so that stores can be more intentional about saying, hey, your fragrance has this chemical in it, so it cannot go into our stores, or yeah, so that's it. That's all.
Eliane, anything you'd like to see outside of products themselves to keep pushing us forward?
Yeah, to piggyback, I agree with the law regulation. I think that we definitely need law enforcement involved, but I think that funding is a huge piece of the puzzle. Like, we won't know what's harmful. Unfortunately, like, we don't find out things are harmful until we find out things are harmful. But if we have the money to do the research ahead of time, and like, Dr. Franklin just told you her very exhaustive way of even being able to get something on a bench where she can actually examine to see if this is actually harmful or not. She gave you like the tip of the iceberg, but there's so many nuances behind that. And what happens if she doesn't get accepted, if she doesn't get the funding, then it just goes the stone goes unturned. And then we wait until, women are coming forth saying like, oh, I used relaxers in my hair and I found out I have uterine cancer now because of it. So it's those kind of things that happen before, and it could have all been avoided if we had got ahead of the curve. So I think that funding for research purposes is so important. And like, I feel like when you look at the STEM, like the STEM branch, the T, which is the technology, always gets all of the funding because it's sexy, it's fresh. But science, math, engineering, we all kind of fight for what's left, the crumbs that's left, because nobody is willing to fund those things. But these are the things that keep us alive and keep us going. So I would love to see, people really back more science investigations that we need to have to make sure that we're safe in the market. So that, and then also too, like for me as a scientist, just holding suppliers to a standard, saying like, we're not going to work with this type of stuff because we know that this isn't right. And being able to like stand 10 toes down on that and saying like, we want safer products out here. The consumers are asking for safer products. When people walk into Whole Foods, they're not questioning whether this product is okay. They know it. because Whole Foods has went through this whole vetting system to make sure it's okay. So I feel like we as scientists on our end, we have to do that. And when people have a finished product, they need that confidence to know, like, you know, even if I use a silicone in my product, I've used the best silicone. I've used the best preservative. I've used the safest preservative or the safest emulsifying system or whatever that's going to keep this earth straight and keep us okay. So I think that we have to like really do our end as brand builders and brand owners to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to make sure these products are safe.
Well, I want to thank you both for such a rich conversation today. This was absolutely wonderful. So honored to have you both on the line. And please let folks know, where can we keep up with you? Where can we listen to those podcasts? We all like to share your information.
Yeah, you can follow me on social media of all kinds. I am your fave chemist on everything. And then I think LinkedIn, I'm just Eliane Treadwell. So easy to find me.
Yeah, and as for me, the podcast is The Research Her. It should be on every platform. Then as far as personal connections, you can find me at LinkedIn.in/Elissia. So I'm just Elissia Franklin on LinkedIn, and I love to make any connections that if anyone's interested.
And we will be hosting some more webinars. You can keep up with Lillian Augusta Beauty at Hair Without Harm on all platforms. You can check us out on hairwithoutharm.com. And of course, we'd like to thank our sponsors today, the YWCA Chicago, Breed Love Entrepreneurship Center, as well as the William Blair Capital Collective for sponsoring this event, organizing the Zoom. Thank you all so much. It was great talking to you both today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And folks, do
You
keep up with them.
too.
They've got some great podcasts. Be at the cutting edge. Know what's happening next.